My name is Sébastien Benard. I'm a game developer, game designer. I do work in a company. Actually, it's a one company. It's the company I built, which is called Deepnight Games.
You were a co-founder of Motion Twin, you said. Like
18 years. That's it's
Yeah,
amazing.
not getting younger, definitely.
I wanted to ask you a bit about the differences between when you started making games and what you're doing now, and if there are any lessons you think you could have told yourself back then that would have improved or changed anything about your initial experience.
Um, uh, I know for sure that I did fail like a lot. I mean, I've made before Dead Cells. Of course, we did make like I don't know, hundreds of games or stuff like that on web. We used to make web games mostly with Flash and web games, and we did have quite a few success, especially in France. But most of our games were like not great or even straight failures. And definitely, I think the most important thing for me was to survive these failures. Every time you fail at something, if you manage to continue after that and to not stop at that point, usually you learn like a lot of things.
How did you how did you guys stay afloat for so long if you said that you like a bunch of your first games were failures? Maybe I misheard you or something, but it sounds like you
No,
said
They said he said that they made like hundred games. I guess some failures are expected.
like uh, how long did you develop games for before uh, did you work while making the games, or were the
I,
games your livelihood?
no, no, actually, I did work when I was at Motion Tune. It was my main work to create games. But when I say it was a failure, it was a very specific market because we were making free-to-play games, and before it was like a nightmare to do so. But it was really cool on the web to make free-to-play because it was a very balanced and honest market to be fair. It's not like you're trying to to suck money from people. You're just making a game, and people, if they like it, they buy it. If they don't, it's fair. But also, so we actually didn't need to have like a very successful game to actually live from it. It was pretty okay. And among all these failures, we did have like I would say 5 or 6 really good success. But these one were big enough to actually pay for everything. So it's more like because of this kind of game, I was able to survive. Yet again, it's like the survivor bias, but I could afford to fail in some way. But yeah, definitely, I've learned much more from my failures definitely than my success.
I want to. It's a different topic, but I've seen from the Motion Twin site that the company is 100% employee owned. Like it's a worker co-op in a sense. And I wanted to ask how if that was the same when you were there, and how was that? Like, I feel like it's a very different type of development than I guess normal AAA or even regular indies. Um,
The way that it approached that is was actually simple in the idea, not exactly as simple to implement, but it was to be equal on 3 aspects. It was equal pay, equal time, and equal decision. So everyone was paid exactly the
wow.
same, no matter your experience, time in company, or stuff like that.
That's
Everyone
wild.
was to work exactly. Yeah, it's actually very cool to do that. It's you have to give up on something, of course, doing so, but it's really very inclusive for new people. And the last one was equality in decision, so everyone had like one vote for any decision.
Did you have a like someone who led uh, different aspects of develop like people who led different aspects of development?
Sure.
Like,
Yeah. When I say we had, it's a very fluid decision process, because even if everyone has one vote for any decision, if you are like a developer and we are discussing about an artistic question, yes, you can say I have an opinion on that, but most of the time we actually did follow people who had the lead on this topic, this particular topic. So if it was an artistic topic, of course we would follow more the artist. If it was a development topic, we would probably follow more the opinions of developers and marketing and so on.
How does it work in practice? Because game development, game development has like I feel like it's one of like any artistic thing. It has incredible amount of decisions all the time. And how do you know which decisions are ones that you gather people and you vote for, which are not?
It sounds very weird, but I would say it's based on laziness. If you're like really interesting and very specific topic, and you want to go for a debate in the meeting room about this particular topic, that's probably a good idea because there's some reason for that. But most of the time, people would just say, really? Okay, I don't care enough to go for it. And we would just go on and that's it. And most of the time it was actually like that. So when something is really not that important, so you can leave this decision to someone else and it feels like it's reasonable enough. That's it. You can just go on your normal business and that would work. And when something really touchy happens, of course, you just go to the meeting room and that's it.
Did you have times where you had like decisions that a lot of people were very invested in, and you had yeah, and how does that go?
We did have a few meetings that were like days long, like really days long. For the morning you get in the meeting room, you leave at the evening, and the next day you start again and you go on and go on. But usually it's the sign that this is a very important topic somehow. And we did have that for cancellation of games. For example, like a game which was going nowhere and we had to decide to cancel it. Even if people involved in this game were not really didn't agree. If you talk enough to people, if you try to understand the issue enough, and you do that, even if you're the person which is, for example, involved in this game, and you try to understand the point of people who have issues with your game, most of the time, if you will feel that they are right to cancel the game. Even if it's like a very displeasant moment for you, they probably have good reason to do that.
So you're saying it's very interesting because me and Ido, when we were developing games, we had those types of conflicts, I guess. And we've heard a lot of people like having those, and usually a game director is the one that comes in and say, we're doing that. And it doesn't seem to be what happened in your case. Your solution is just talk a lot until like you're saying that if you talk enough about something, it will reach that point. Would you say that this type of development is ideal, or would different games would require a director or a different type of hierarchy?
No, I would definitely not recommend to anyone on earth to do that. It's not because it's a bad system, definitely not. One thing which is really important, actually two things. Two things that really are important is this thing and this approach. It's highly based on systems, on stuff, on rules. So you have many more rules than any other company. We did have systems to manage our time to work at the office. We did actually write hour by hour our work time on a calendar. We did have maybe 10 at the worst time. We did have 10 systems to take decision, different vote systems. Everyone should agree, or at least one, or majority, or whatever. The worst thing that did happen to us was to get into a conflict and to have no way to disarm this conflict. Fun fact, we did everything failed until this point. The last one was to throw dice. It's a rule that we did agree at the beginning of the company. If we cannot agree on something and everyone is like 50-50 in the votes, you can throw dice, and that's it. And you have to accept whatever. So you have to decide to accept this kind of really weird system beforehand. So the first thing, because of that, it's complicated. And the second thing is human factor. I was really lucky to have people that actually agree with the system, but like agree to the art. It's not like, oh yeah, it's fun, I will do that, all right. But the day you get conflict and everything goes into fire, and that's it. You have to find people who actually truly agree with this concept. I did have, for example, like a meeting. You know the company Shiro Games? They made Dune, War Tales, and Evoland, this kind of Northgard. The founder of the company was also someone from Motion Twin at first. And I did have like a very, very bad meeting with him, very big point of conflict. We almost reached the point that we would definitely fight to agree. And at the end of the meeting, we took a decision. One of us was really disappointed by this decision. And the evening, we had a party at his house. So you have to leave the meeting saying, okay, that's it. We have decided. Now we are friends again. Because if you cannot accept that, it's really not working on the long term, definitely not. So on the human side, it's really difficult to find people who truly agree with that. And many people would just say, yeah, I like that. But in reality, when bad things happen, you have no one anymore.
Do you think it's
Sounds good, yeah.
do you think it's important? Well, you basically answered that. I was about to ask if you think it's important to disconnect like work from friends.
It's really disconnect decisions from friendship. Because you have to work with friends. It's really cool because you tend to have more fun at work, of course. But when you take a decision, it's not against someone. It's really because the decision is better for the company, and you're talking with the company in mind, and not with someone who has a different opinion than you. It's really what is the best decision for the company, and no bad feeling, no feeling involved. It's really maybe I disagree with you, and maybe you will be my ally in next meeting. So we don't know.
How much of your time do you think you spent on like actually working compared with just dealing with emotions and like
politics, I guess.
yeah, politics?
Actually, it was longer in the end. It's really funny because at the beginning we were really a team of 5 people, and actually we were just 2 at one point, Benjamin and me. And at the beginning it was really easy because we were lucky enough that these 5 person, including me, we were okay with the idea of fighting in meeting and being friends after that. And it was really okay. Just we like to debate, we like to have stupid discussions about stupid topics. So it was really straightforward on that. But it became more and more complicated to get new people involved in this system. We actually did have a PDF document, we call that Red Book, which was like a PDF that we handled to people to say, this is all the rules from the company, like many rules. And you have to get a good read of that and get a general idea and to truly agree with that. And of course, as the company evolves and you get to meet new people and people leave the company, it's more and more difficult to stay true to this idea. So it was definitely the main flow of Motion Twin. It still is, by the way. The main flow for the companies to recruit new people, because it's really hard to find people who agree with that. It's also really hard to find people who won't get hurt by that. And we don't want to hurt people in any way. But sometimes you have to take a decision, you have to say something to someone, and if this person is not ready to take that, it really hurts a lot, because you're feeling that your judge skills or whatever. So it's really hard to find new people to integrate in this kind of system. That's why I would not recommend anyone to go for this, except if you're super lucky and like truly in confidence with a bunch of people.
You're working alone now.
Yeah.
what are the differences, and would you recommend people start out working alone or trying to start out with a group?
Also, why do you work alone?
Yeah.
Well, I will answer that one first. I hate people now. I mean, I spent literally 18 years of my life debating in meeting. No, no, I'm joking. But it's really lots of energy that you have to involve into making that work. And when you are working with people who are not exactly in line with this idea of we can disagree and still be friends, you have to weight a lot on your own shoulders to make sure everything goes okay. So it's really energy consuming. So definitely something I'm really happy not to take care about anymore. And really also happy to work alone. But also it's not something I would recommend to people for first experience, except if you're like you don't like people. So okay, but because you have to manage, you have to micromanage your own energy, and I like to call that your mana, your magic energy. And it's really difficult to do that because downtime will happen a lot when you're making a project. You will, I call that my dark zone. When you're in your dark zone in a project, it always happens a lot, maybe multiple times in a single project. And you have, when you're working a lot, you have no one who will help you to get out of this dark zone. Dark zone is basically my game is shit. It's the moment, and we do all have that for whatever reason. And when you're working a lot, it's difficult to get along with this. And you have to find your energy somehow. You have to talk to people. You have to play in other games. You have to rethink your game if it's necessary, but most of the time it is not. Just a bad moment to go. So yeah, it's really cool to work alone because I'm really much faster than I was at Motion Twin. I can make things without having to discuss strategic decisions on my project. But when you are in the dark zone for whatever reason, for example, it was the case early December this year, last year. So I probably lost, I don't know, about a month of work just because I was not really happy with what I was doing anymore. Something was off or stuff like that. And actually, I didn't change anything. So I'm just back to work and that's it.
I feel
So,
like the
Yeah.
dark zone that you're talking about, I feel like that's something that is very, very common. Like how do you like in December, how did that look? How did that month look? How did you enter it? How did you exit it? What are your strategies? Like first of all, you actually notice it. Like you give it a name. I feel like most people are not in that level. They
They're just like,
feel
damn,
bad for a while.
yeah, damn, I guess I suck.
Yeah.
exactly. You have,
So
you
how
have,
did that
you have
how did
many
that go?
for that. There is a nice graph on the internet. You can Google that. It's the creative process, which exactly looks like that. Yeah, okay. It's awesome, and you are shit. No, the project is shit. You are shit, and then it goes back up, and it's really the main thing for me is to know about it, just to know that it will happen. It's not because there is a good reason for that. Sometimes it's like an indicator of something which is off on the project, but really most of the time it's just me which is like tired of the game, and so it's just a matter of surviving this kind of moment because you know that they will happen and you can do much about that. And in a team it's really different because in a team everyone will have this moment, but because they won't happen at the same time, when you will be down someone will be up, so things will
Yeah, I
take
know.
balance
I
over
noticed that in my own like the place I work at, I sometimes come to work and like I'm QA and I do design and stuff. So I have very intimate like relation with the game and I play the game and like, oh God, the game doesn't run at all. We're fucked. And then I go to work and like someone else has just made something really cool and they're very excited about it and then like, oh, maybe the game is kind of cool. Like
Exactly.
yeah.
So it's really, in a team, you will feel this problem in a different way. But most of the time, just seeing people around you working in the game and being really passionate about it will help you to go up again. But when you're alone, this happen, of course, less because you just have to rely on your own energy and own motivation. And that's something, if anyone wants to go alone, you have to take this, sorry for the quote, but if you want to go alone, you definitely have to keep that in mind, because this really is the main, on my point of view, it's my main enemy, definitely.
How do you deal with it? Like you have this, you notice that you're in the dark zone. What do you do now?
Now, most of the time, I just try to stay productive in some way. For example, I do work on a side project, which is a level editor, 2D level editor, which is actually the backbone of my game development career. I have this tool which is help me. I use it, it's a level editor, to make my levels in all my games.
I downloaded that. I found it on your website.
Yeah,
Pretty cool
actually
tool.
updated it. The website was updated yesterday.
Oh, wow.
So it's like my how do you say that, my teddy bear, this small thing that you like to go back to when you're like sad. I don't know, in French we call that a doudou, which is like your teddy bear, your very own teddy bear. Could be your cat, by you. But this kind of project is the kind of thing I like to do when my game project is in a bad situation, in the dark zone, just because I know that the time I will spend on this tool won't be lost. It will be useful in some way, in some way to my game. It's really part of the world development process. And if I cannot advance on my editor, I would just work on a few game design research. I would just maybe complete my market study spreadsheet. I just try to do side things, but as long as they are still part of the game, just somehow, just to make sure that I don't lose too much time, and still keeping the idea in my mind, just to let it grow and evolve, and the project, the problem, the issue will probably solve by itself. So just have to keep that in mind and let it go. And at one point, it will just continue, and that's it.
You find the spark again, like it just happens, I guess, after a while.
It's really strange, because most of the time it's not exactly like I just find a new small or important core thing in my game to improve. And I know that working on that will actually make the whole game better. And usually I get out of the dark zone when this happens. For example, in December, I was stuck on the world layout of the game, because it's a rogue. So you have this kind of big world that you will explore and die and retry. I was stuck with this world idea. I still have issues with this, but actually I got out of the dark zone because I focused on working on the items and weapons of the game, to make sure that actually items will make much more combinations than in Dead Cells. So you will have more strategies and builds and on things to do using your weapons together. And actually doing that was a good way to still advance the game, but not focus too much on the issues that I did have. So,
do you think QA helps with that?
QA, because it really depends also on people doing the QA. For me, it's like when we were making mobile games at one point, we did lots of data-oriented game design. So based on people actually playing on stats, big data, stuff like that. And QA is sometimes, if you don't ask the question properly, you will not get the answer that you will probably get the answer that you did expect, which is like, it's a little bit of a time lost. So QA is difficult, because if you are not like with a very good QA tester, questions will actually be biased. How do you say that in English? Most of the time, when I make A/B test or testing with people or just showing the game, I really try to not explain my problem. Just most of the time, just because if I do, people would just play or explain in a different way, and I won't get the fresh experience that I'm looking for.
We've spoken to several people who have very different takes on QA. Some of them say that they just want someone who comes in from the start and stays for a very long time on QA. because then they probably know the game as well as you do, and they're able to identify both your design decisions and what works and what doesn't. And there are people who say, I don't like, I'd rather bring in as many new people as I can, uh, because that the initial experience is the most important thing for me.
Hmm. Actually, I think both are really important because I like this. I don't remember who said that, but it was like the five first seconds, first minutes, 15 first minutes, and five first hours. Something like that. I don't remember exactly, but you get the idea. It's really about making sure that at 5 seconds you have something interesting happening. At 15 you have something like a hook, and you have at 5 minutes you have something fresh which say, hey, there is potential in this game, and 5 hours you have actually depth in your game. And it's really important to have someone who have no idea what the game is about if you want to test that. And for me, it's really is a big part of making games to have a good onboarding and a game that suggests that it actually has lots of depth and potential. So, but sometimes you also need someone who actually will go straight to the point to test a new build system, a new type of enemy, or very specific boss. So you have to have someone who is at least a little bit experienced with the game or with this type of game in some way. So I would say both are really important. I do tend to prefer to have fresh people to just challenge the game to its root, because for me the core loop of a game is more important than anything else. Just having the five first minutes really fun, that's it, done, job done. But things after that, it's just about metrics on stats, on items, on the upgrades.
How did you test for Dead Cells? Because Dead Cells is a game that you can play for hundreds of hours if you want to.
We didn't have much test on this one. It was really more like theory crafting for me when I was making this one. We did have maybe 3 or 4 playtests, formal playtests, but it's really not that much. And
But you were also in early access, which
yes,
is in itself a form of like playtesting.
Yeah, but early access, we in development we say that going early access is going live. So it's like your main sales peak will happen at the beginning of early access. So if you fail at the beginning of early access, it's really difficult to succeed at 1.0 update. You have a few examples like No Man's Skies or Starfield, maybe, I don't know, stuff like that. But most of the time, it's really difficult to get. Hades is a good example of that. Hades wasn't that great at the beginning, but it was really, really good after.
Would you say that, from what you say, would you say that the success of Dead Cells came because it was just really fucking good as a game?
I think Dead Cells. If you were to make again Dead Cells today, it would not probably would not be such a success. Honestly, I think the main reason for Dead Cells to be successful, and even for the visuals, it was because at that time, if you were looking for rogue platformers, you only had Rogue Legacy and things that's pretty
Spelunky.
Spelunky, yeah. And except those two, you didn't have much rogues on platformers. And both of them, I love them. I really did play this game a lot, but they were really clunky to play. The combat system was like throwing your sword in loop in front of you.
Yeah, I feel like Dead Cells it brought good combat into roguelikes
Exactly.
in general.
And I think we are lucky enough to have the correct kind of game feel and game design for this type of game at this precise moment in time. If we were like 2 years later, it would probably have been not such a success. But because it was like a promise of being a rogue platformer and an action game with actual combat and fun combat, this premise was probably the reason that people got hooked in the first place.
And then they stayed because the game was good. Okay, that's interesting.
It was good in the end, but that's
Yeah.
something that we didn't believe until we pushed the green button.
You had a very strong motive when you started making Dead Cells. Like, based on what you said, you wanted to make a roguelike with good combat. How important do you think having a strong desire when coming into a project or coming into like starting to develop a game is? Or what do you think you need before coming into development of any type of game?
That's a good question. It's really difficult because it's basically asking yourself, should I involve my next few months and years making this, and is it a viable project in any way? Is it something that I should do because I'm going to spend quite a lot of time doing that? Is it a good idea? For me, it's really like from time to time, you will be playing games and you will say, hey, it would be cool to have this kind of game. And you're looking for it, you're browsing games and you're looking for something that feels like that. And somehow you don't find any. Like, for example, for Dead Cells, it was really making, I wanted to have an action like a Castlevania game, but with rogue elements. It was really just that. And we were like, oh yeah, that's a good idea. Let's see what people did on that. And actually, we didn't find like anything except Spelunky and Rogue Legacy. We did find a few ones, but really not that much. If sometime you identify like a gap, like a loophole in something, you would say, hey, it would be cool, but hey, that doesn't exist actually. For me, it's my main motivation to make a project. Usually, I have a broad idea for things I would like to do, but if it fits like a all, and this all is actually like a viable place to be, it's just enough for me to start. We were really lucky on Dead Cells to have this funny word that we kept and we market like to the max, which was Roguevania. It's something that we came up with just in the middle of a discussion. We did have this keyword of making a Roguevania. And it was like a really, really powerful word to explain. I think sometimes you have a very small concept that can be explained, and it actually explains everything. It's a whole game behind it. So for that test, we are really lucky to have this thrown randomly in the middle of a discussion. So it was really the strong start point of this. And actually, we kept that till the end. It was the main marketing motto for the game.
Saying that,
the answer to the question.
So you're saying that one very powerful motivator both for the team and for like the game is to have this very strong concept. Even like Roguevania is just a word, but it clearly shows clearly shows where it fits in the market and shows what the game is in a sense. So you're saying that's important. Yeah. I
think in game design terms, it's really similar to the pillars of a game. You know, when you are making game design whatsoever, you actually have 2 or 3 pillars, columns, strong words that will help to define the game, and they're like really difficult to find, these pillars, these words, because if you say exploration is like doesn't mean anything. It means everything and anything. So it's really similar to that, to have a super short explanation of the game that can actually sell a dream of a game designer behind that. And Dead Cells was really the starting point of the game when we decided to switch to give up on multiplayer on mobile, and it actually slowly turned into what it is now.
I want to ask if Ido doesn't have.
No, go ahead.
Okay.
Actually, didn't have a question
Dead
planned.
Cells, you were working mostly on gameplay and balance, which I feel like some of the game's strongest points. And I wanted to ask, what's your approach to balance? Like, let's say you have a specific weapon or a specific enemy, and you're saying, like, first of all, how do you catch that there's some balancing needed to do there, and then how do you go about it?
I'm not sure my answer will be great, but
it works, so I think it's great.
My main way, I'm really bad at, I'm not really great at mathematics. So I like to fill spreadsheets, but at some point it's really difficult for me to see fun through numbers. to see if this weapon will just be fun, if it does like an extra DPS or whatever. So most of the time, I really don't care about really actual values. Most of the time, I just make a fun weapon, whatever it is. And I'm focusing on the TTK metric, which is time to kill. Something that you will probably see in other titles. But time to kill is really a very easy way to balance things. The idea is in Dead Cells, I remember it was 1 second, 3 seconds, or 6 seconds. It's now a little bit lower than that, but basically killing any enemy in the game should be 1 second, 3 seconds, or 6 seconds. And depending on your approach, if you're taking a risky approach, like something that you would probably get hit in return, it's 1 second to kill. So if you are making a weapon which is like difficult to use but very powerful, so it's 1 second, 1 second TTK. And if you're making like an auto turret that will kill enemies for you, it's more like 6 seconds. In the end, it's actually 1 and 3 seconds. We gave up on the 6 because it was just too long. But the idea is that I don't care much about balancing of weapons. If you have anything, it's very natural, for example, to have a slow, huge weapon to do lots of damage because the TTK is 1, while having like a very fast sword and you are slashing enemies very quickly, it's more TTK free, and something in between. But in the end, the DPS is like a calculated value based on TTK. So you don't care much about actual DPS. You're just thinking about, is it a difficult weapon to use? So yeah, so you should be rewarded to kill enemy faster with that. If it's like a very chill weapon like bows and turrets and weapons like that, TTK will be slower. So the game overall will be slower. But that's it. That's your playstyle. Who am I to disagree with that? So it's really just balancing everything through TTK.
So to summarize it, you first start by making it fun, and then you lower or up it based on like a metric that is universal to the whole game in a sense, because
Exactly.
TTK is something that you do all the time.
Yeah,
that's cool.
The advantage of that is that you don't really have much to observe. You really don't think in DPS terms. You just think in is it as fast to use this weapon than this weapon? Is it fair? Okay, that's it.
I feel like I'm gonna ask a very specific question. We have like the game I'm currently making is also.
Eli, I'll stop you for a moment because I also wanted to ask like about what is your approach towards designing the movement inside Dead Cells?
At one point, the most important and I think definitely the most important decision in this game whatsoever in the whole development process was to say that Dead Cells was not a platformer game. It was an action game. It was a combat game, but it was not a platformer. So when you say that, and when you accept that, and everyone do agree with that, it actually leads to lots of strange decisions, but actually that actually makes the game better because it's more focused on what it's actually about. And that says when you decide to say it's not a platformer game, so suddenly you don't have to fail a jump. So that's why you are grabbing everywhere, you are jumping, and it's really smooth, and you are never stopped by anything. Actually, you have pretty much no trap in the game, except in a few specific levels. You don't have spikes, lava floors, or stuff like that. You do have really a few specific part of the game with that, but most of the time it's not about that. And it's really everything about combat. So in this case, yes, definitely understanding what the game is about and getting rid of everything which is in the way, like platforming, typically. So when you have that in mind, you're making everything in your movements to be in line with that. So climbing walls, jumping on platforms, and jumping between platforms, it's very different from making like a manic platformer, like I don't know, Super Meat Boy or Celeste or this type of games. You're making a game where you should never fail because of platforming. So you're making everything you can to make sure that the player will probably succeed into doing everything because it's not the point of the game. So,
my question before was This was also a good,
Yeah,
answer.
great answer.
Yeah, but my question before was it's very specific because the game I'm making right now is also a roguelike, also has bosses, and we have a problem where the boss is very hard for new players and very, very boring for old players. And I feel like that's a very specific roguelike boss problem that I haven't seen a good solution to. So I wonder about what's your approach
Yeah,
to it?
one actually. I'm working on it, but yeah, it's actually you have ways to embrace the idea that you are making a rogue, but also you want to have a rogue with bosses. For example, my solution is actually quite simple and it's nothing really fancy. It actually works well with the rogue design. Basically, in my game, you have let's say 4 bosses to beat in the game, but you can fight them in any order that you want. If you want to go for the boss A or boss B and D and C, it's up to you. But the thing is, if you fight boss A first, you will just have one pattern in this boss. But if you fight boss A first, you will have 4 different patterns. You will have 4 different attacks. And maybe you're really bad at dodging the last attack of boss A because it's really hard for you. It's like, I don't know, it's a bullet hell or whatever. So it still is the same game. You have 4 bosses, 4 patterns from them, but because you're leaving the player decision to choose which pattern he will actually encounter in his run, you actually are giving strategic decisions even for boss patterns.
I wanted to ask you if there's anything else, or A, if you agree with that, and B, if you think there's anything else that makes a game marketable, or that it is important for any game to have to be successful in the market.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. If you're making like a very visually unique game, but it's like an action game, but maybe you have puzzle games that look like that, but are puzzle games. We don't care about that. It's really being different in your own segment of market. So if you're making an action game, be different from other action games. But different is difficult, I think, because what is different and what is actually appealing to people. For me, that's a tip I got from Steve that I was talking about earlier. It's really, if you Google action games, for example, if you can quickly identify a game, even if it's small fun-laid, you're doing a good job, I think. Whatever your visual style is. If your game is identifiable, it can be recognized among many others. That means you probably have done something right. For example, I do love Outer Wilds, but this game, if you try to look for 3D games, actually Outer Wilds looks a lot like many other games. It's not unique visually, it's unique design-wise, it's unique in the universe. But if you're looking for top-down action games, you will probably instantly recognize Hades, you will recognize, before that, yeah, there was Bastion, Dead Cells, of course, in platformers. But some games are visually recognizable. And I think that's really the most important thing, is make sure that if you Google action games, you don't look like everything that you see on your screen. And just try to keep that in mind. And for us, it actually did happen like that for Dead Cells. At this time, there was this game which was called Salt and Sanctuary. Actually, they announced the second one. And Salt and Sanctuary, there was another one, but I don't remember. It was before Blasphemous. But we knew that because of this combat system that we had, we'll probably compare to Souls-like at one point. And the best way to if you're looking for Souls-like in Google, now it will be more colorful, but before a few years ago, it was all brown and gray and black. And that was a Google image result of Souls-like. And because of that, we decided to go, okay, we'll put saturation to the max, we'll put color everywhere, and we try to make something really colorful, even if it's like a dark place. Just we want colors, we want brightness, we want warm colors, just to be different from Salt and Sanctuary and this type of Souls-like. So yeah, the first intent of the design, the visual design, was to, for the environment at least, it was to be different from other action games and platformer action games that we saw.
How long did it take you to find the aesthetic style? Like, Did you try different versions? Did you like where did it come from? How long did it take you to get there? What did you do to get there?
The artist, I think it actually came from a few constraints and really quickly actually. For example, we knew that we didn't want to spend too much production time on painting non-gameplay areas, typically inside the walls. We didn't want to paint that because it was too expensive and doesn't worth the time. So, for example, if you have a platform and you have a building below that, we don't want to paint windows and the walls because it's really not important. It's not a place that you will play. This the black walls. Everything is black in the non-gameplay areas because of that. Because we really did not want to spend too much production time on that. And the opposite happened really quickly because the first mock-ups, it was we needed to have contrast with the black walls. And so we decided to have bright and colorful backgrounds and really lots of gradients and colors. And the very first, I think I did post a few things like that on my website in the Dead Cells section of my website. The very first concept art was like mock-ups of the visuals. They were basically that black grounds and a very colorful background. I will have to check. I think it's.
I think I found the image. See?
Yeah.
Is it this one?
Like, where did you learn pixel art? It's really good.
I don't think I post them, but yeah, it was used to be a few visuals from swamps on caves and stuff like that. And the idea, it's more like no, not that one. That one was a tower defense on mobile. But I will probably have, I do probably have them somewhere. But it was really all about that, just making, because of these black walls, we needed to have contrast, and we wanted to be not another Satan Sanctuary and another Souls-like. So colorful, and it was really just a chain of consequences, basically, to us. Also, just a quick fun fact, you know, the character has no head, is beheaded. And actually, it came from a bug at the beginning where the head was not rendered in the rasterizer app that we used. So we basically had a body with no head. So for fun, I did put a few fire particles on the head. And at one point, I just said it would be cool to. Oh, it was not me, sorry. Someone in the company said that it would be cool to be. How do you say that? You cannot just talk. Not mute.
Skeleton?
No. When you can talk, you diff. You can hear and
mute.
Mute? Is it mute?
If you can't speak, you're mute.
Yeah. Mute. So basically, having the character being mute, and because we still are. I'm especially really shitty at writing stuff. So dialogue, story, stuff like that, we are not that good. And maybe having the player actually cannot talk would help us a lot. Like you don't have to write dialogues because you cannot talk. Actually, the idea was really fun to everyone in the team, and we decided to go with it. That's why you have this character who actually do moves and stuff like that, and is really like an asshole, but he doesn't talk. It was actually just a consequence also of a bug that actually became a feature after.
Okay. What do you think is the most overlooked part in a game's production?
Or pre-production, like game development.
Yeah.
I'll just say something quite obvious for me, but it's controls. I see so many times games that have. Did I say Ubisoft game earlier? I did, but I really cannot understand why AAA games tend to have so awful menus, inventory systems. I mean, Starfield. Well, do they even have QA testers? But yeah, ergonomics and controls. I think
when you say controls, you mean UI, or even as far as like the character is controlled? Like,
both actually, because you have to have. I think you have to have some consistency between game controls and UI controls. if you have a concept of canceling and you have a button to cancel in your game, that's definitely the cancel button in the menu. I mean, why are you switching to LB and menus for whatever reason? So it's really having a broad idea of the player controls and the gamepad especially, or mouse and keyboard. What it looks like in game, it should be good, of course, but it should also be coherent on the whole game. It should stay the same. But yeah, I would also obviously say the same for player controls like jumping and grabbing, I don't know, attacking enemies. And so many times I see a game where just a jump is just not good because the curve is not natural, so you cannot guess where you will land in the end. So yeah, definitely controls first. Everything. If you have a game with good controls, it really is a big part of the job done. I'm a big fan, for example, of all the Blizzard game, because they definitely do know how to make good controls in the game. And if you, in any Blizzard game, if you hit escape, it closes the menu always. It's always. If you hit space in Diablo, it closes the windows. Yeah, I mean, it's really like straightforward and efficient, and it feels natural, but you have lots of thinking behind that to reach this point. But when you play a game where the menus are, or the game or something feels clunky, it takes an extra bit of motivation to get involved in this game. So you probably are losing people in the process. So,
how do you get to good controls?
Good question.
The short answer is definitely good controls.
How do you get to them?
Yeah,
he asked.
If you at every given second, if you are testing your game and you get pissed off something because it's too repetitive, that's probably is a good indicator that it's not because you did that for hours. It just means that you are probably touching something which actually is repetitive in this sense and should be addressed somehow. But again, I'm a bit of a Nazi on this kind of topic. So, but for me, if something feels boring at some point, even if it's 10 hours after the beginning, that should be addressed in some way. That should be something to be done at that point. So you cannot, if you think to yourself at one point doing something, it's not great, but that will be okay. No, that means not okay. It's something that you should fix. Control-wise, I mean, you can't say that for anything, but for me, control-wise, that's really is a part of any games I did work on. Something I do work on the controls, probably till the release of the game, because it's always something better to do and to improve.
I didn't really understand what you meant about the control. Like, if something feels wrong after, or something feels repetitive, I didn't really understand what you meant.
A good example of that is long press. When you have something which is done through your long press in your game, like you have to hold use button to pick up something, it feels like a good idea because at the beginning you just don't want people to pick up something in the middle of combat accidentally, for example. So you're making a long press to pick up items. It probably feels right for the first few ones. For example, a good example is Red Dead Redemption 2. I mean, it's really cool looking to open every drawer, pick stuff, and to have full animation on that. That's cool. But after 5 hours, 10, 100 hours, definitely something that you don't want to see anymore. And that's probably something that should be faster after some point, or just skippable in some way. Or maybe you have an option in the menu to disable that. You should have something to address that issue. And you cannot, I think it's not a good idea to have something, for example, removing, still in Red Dead 2, when you're removing the skins from animals, it's a cool looking animation, I mean, but at some point you just want to something that you're watching a TV show at the same time while you play because of that.
In Far Cry 3, I remember that's one of like the thing that most annoyed me, even like 10 years ago.
And I'm pretty sure the developer did feel like, because they did do that for, I don't know how many times, they probably feel that, but they didn't want to address that because maybe they felt that it's part of the body awareness of the game. It's part of the feeling of playing an actual world. And I do agree with that. But that's true for the first few hours. At some point, you just don't want to see that anymore. In Cyberpunk, you don't want to see this get inside the car animation again and again. Getting out of the car is probably more important. Just every time you leave the car, you make something much faster at some point. I don't know. But that's just me ranting about modern games.
I get it. They kind of like don't respect your time. I get it.
Yeah.
It's also not part of the fun anymore. So go away and focus on something which is more rewarding after some point. When you acknowledge that, you recognize that in your game, that's okay. It was fun at the beginning. Now we just want to do something else.
I'll try to wrap up because I've been here much longer than in the email. To ask you a few last questions. What is the development process for, let's say, Dead Cell? Like, what did it look like? Did you prototype something, polish it, like let's say the control movement or the controls or anything until it felt right? Or did you start making a bunch of prototypes and then iterating on them as you went along?
No, for Dead Set, it was really advancing on one single prototype. But it was a bit painful for my colleagues because that really did happen a lot for me to, for example, go on weekend and come back on Monday with something totally broke in the game because it was just more fun to do this way now. And but yeah, it was really it was a main prototype, a main game, and iterating on that. Um, but when you do that, you have to accept that sometimes you had a bad idea on a game, and you have to scrap something which was part of the game since the beginning. For example, in Dead Cells during the early access, we did have this. I don't remember it. Basically, it was Skyrim build system. It was a free stat, more like Oblivion stat system. You had free stats, life, HP. I don't remember damage and whatever, the third one. And we decided to switch to brutality, subtlety, finesse, and survival, and to group items, bows in tactics, and fast weapon, brutality, and slow weapons and shields in survival. Because basically it was the same content, but organized this way, it was much more interesting, just having free stats like HP damage and whatever. So this kind that did happen. I think it was 6 months after the early access. So the game was already live, public, and people got used to that. So when you're working on a main prototype like that, you have to accept that you have to scrap this because it's just better to do that. And then you have to explain people that it's better, and convince people to do that. And a fun fact, actually, it was at that point in the game that we decided to include in the patch notes what was community-driven content. Like this idea came from the community. It's not our fault. No, it's basically meant to be that. We decided to switch that. Hey, you see, it's community driven. We can point to a topic that actually did talk about.
It's not our fault if it's bad.
Yes, that's what you wanted, guys. But
that's what you wanted in it. Yeah.
So you basically just work, like you could have the core system and you'd work on it repeatedly and slowly introduce new things.
Yeah, exactly. Really how it worked. The only thing that I didn't do like that, it was what I call the director of the game, which was it's really inspired by Left 4 Dead 1 and 2, the way they manage their AI. Basically, they have some kind of AI, which is the game master of the game. Basically, it's an AI that observes the game playings and Left 4 Dead, and it says it would be cool to have this guy who is in this other room to throw lots of zombies at this person because it's just isolated. It will be fun. And the director on Left 4 Dead just do that. You have lots of interesting talk about this concept. And actually, we had something similar on Dead Cells. I can't talk about that because I'm not under NDA anymore. But we have some kind of director in the game which actually cheats a lot, cheats a lot, sorry, about the randomness of the game. So the actual random content that you get, it's actually really under control of this system. So if you, for example, if you we know that will drop you a legendary weapon at a very specific rate in the game. And if you don't see it, if you don't pick it up for some reason, we'll give you it again in the next run, just to give you this feeling of luck. And but this part was designed aside from the game. It was really a separate prototype because it necessitated lots of testing and iteration. But it was not related to the actual gameplay. It was more like a global concept, how to distribute the loot and to produce content, and what frequency should you have. For example, a good example of that is the gold system in Dead Cells. If you don't pick all the gold in a level, actually what you didn't pick will go to a special hidden value location in memory, and will just give you extra money in next level based on what you didn't pick before, just to make sure that the game feels balanced. And it feels also like you're lucky because you have lots of gold or a very beautiful jewel by killing an enemy, but it's basically what you didn't get before. So just giving it.
Would you
That's
say
an
that
awesome system.
like I'm working in our game, we also have some systems like that, and just it's the first time that I thought about them. Would you say that one of the main things that separate good from bad roguelikes is how they manipulate like the randomness to make the experience better? Because like people feel like it's random, but it's not. It like
No,
it's
no.
yeah.
Pure randomness is absolutely awful. It's really easy to generate a random dungeon. Like a random dungeon is like you take 1 hour and that's it. You make a good random dungeon generator. What is really, really, really difficult and actually takes months to balance is actually to make a random generator that produce a good result every time. Like every time you ask something, it's a good and interesting dungeon. And that that thing actually is way more complicated than anything. If you rely on random, you will have to put so many safeguards on your randomness that at one point it won't be random anymore because you will precisely explain to your random generator what is a good result. So basically, just do it. And so randomness is not. It's like the biggest lie. I mean, for rogue players. But a good rogue is not that random. A good rogue is actually having a good idea what a golden run is and what good loot is and what good loot for this player at this exact moment is. So and also to make sure that it doesn't feel like it's not random. It should be feel always like it's something out of luck. But yeah, I know for sure that Hades did that like a lot, really a lot.
I assume most successful ones did it to some extent.
Yeah.
Very...
It's a
it's
fantastic hidden mechanic.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you about seeing potential in a project. Like, when should you give up a project, or when should you pursue an element, even if it was an unexpected element?
That's really difficult because that's the most hard point to spot when you're making a game, iterating on a game. Sometimes you have a concept at the beginning, you're making it, and you find something which is actually way more fun than anything that you were making. You introduce, I don't know, combat system into like a pure exploration game with no combat, and you put a little bit of combat, and suddenly everything feels better. And you have to decide, should I put combat in my game or should I stay like a pure exploration game? That's a difficult topic. You have no easy answer on that. It's really up to you to decide, do you really want to make an exploration game? And is it something really important to you? Or are you just trying to make a good game in the end? And maybe you should then pick good elements that you discover along the way of making your game. Actually, Dead Cells totally came like that. It really started, as I said, as a mobile multiplayer, whatever game. And actually, at every time we decided to say, this thing doesn't work, but this new thing that we didn't expect works way better. And the most important one was when we decided to switch from tower defense to actual platformer. It was at one point we decided, hey, maybe we should put a little bit of control on the player during the tower defense phase and see what happens. And actually, suddenly it felt like much more dynamic, less static, and observe the plan, stuff like that. And it was a sleepy road to the platformer. And we just decided to say it's a better game to do that. So let's give up on this mobile idea and tower defense and go for that.
How important do you think it is to surround yourself with other developers?
Honestly, I would not say it's important. I think it's crucial. Like it's like a life and death situation, you know. I would take my situation as an illustration of that. I'm working alone. I mean, I'm developing my games by myself. I do have an artist for a few visual questions. Most of the day-to-day decisions and stuff, I do it by myself. But still, at my co-work space, I do work with another developer who is also making games, and we are approximately same age, so same life situation in general. We are not making the same game at all. We are just two separate companies. But being able to just talk to someone who actually understands your questions, it's actually super important. If you are a game designer and you have any kind of game designer friend, you should absolutely get closer to this person just to be able to discuss between we take a coffee and we discuss about that. It's not your game, but you have a good idea what good game design is. We all share these same questions, small companies, indie projects. And so when we ask a question, we know that these people will know. Probably they will understand your issue. Maybe it's marketing company issue, but also game design or art questions. So yeah, just keep in touch with a bunch of people who actually really share your day-to-day issues.
Do you have any tips for students who are getting into the industry or want to build their own game studio?
Sure. Our first one, I will just say the same thing as before, but don't build tools. It's really like it really happens like so many times. People, especially developers, they will just want to make their own game engine for whatsoever reason, because it's exciting to make an engine. I get that, but don't do your tool, your engine by yourself at the beginning. It's the worst thing to do. Definitely, you won't release any game with that. Just use an efficient tool like Unity, Construct, Game Maker, whatever. It's really anything is good as long as you are confident and you have fun using it. Don't build tools and engines. And the second one, I would say do game jams. I can't say that from really personal experience, but I've felt and I've seen exactly the same things making games for years than making games for 40 hours. It's absolutely exactly the same thing. There really no difference between them. So if you want to learn really like the fast way, if you make multiple game jams, you will learn from your failures at the fastest possible rate and without involving and taking risk, too much risk. You're just losing 48 hours or 1 week of your life and that's it. And you will experiment and you will learn quickly how to make a platformer, how to make an FPS or an action game or something. So game jams really like the short summary of game making. It's like a cheat code of game making. And yeah, I think everything else will be just survive to your failures. Yeah. So it's really okay to fail as long as you're okay with that, and you learn much more from your failures than your success. So yeah.